Yo, thanks for tuning in, sharing in this now moment. I'm just going to roll right into it. My intention is always the highest levels of love, light, unity, consciousness, benevolence for all. How are we doing? Wowza. Did you guys feel that yesterday? I kind of feel like it's still lingering. Massive solar activity yesterday. I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to just go into flow because I want to. Wowza. So we got blasted yesterday. I think somebody sent me a message. My friend Candace and I were talking about it. I'm going to kind of go into that in a little bit more detail. And my friend Jess. I mean, it was just rocking. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, I have a tendency to be, you know how people are affected by the moon? I have an effect when there's a full moon. I definitely feel it. I feel more emotional, and I feel more creative, and I feel like there's more stuff to purge sometimes, and the sleeping doesn't come as easy for me during full moon cycles, usually for about 3 days. But I'm really more into, like, the sun is what really gets me. So if it's a lot of planetary alignments and activity with the full moon, then I can get really rocked. But the sun, when there's solar activity, I've said this before, I usually feel it, I guess you call it a pre-wave, or right when it happens. Can I explain that? I don't know how to explain it, really. I'm sure there's some ways to explain it, but I usually feel it, when it's happening, or right before it happens. You know how dogs can sense earthquakes? I sense solar activity. Sometimes I get so wrapped up in, the regular 3D stuff, and then all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, okay, that's what I'm feeling. There must be some solar activity going on today. Or it can sometimes be simultaneous with Kundalini activation. So sometimes if you have an Kundalini activation, that can feel like solar activity, because that's basically very similar to me. It's very electric. So so I want to talk about that a little bit, because I had some beautiful conversations with clients. This is the common theme that I've had in session. For those of you healers and light workers out there, if you're not really familiar with what I'm talking about, I've been doing sessions the last few days, and it was challenging for me. My friend Candace and I had been talking about this feeling pixelated, and I won't go into all the details with some of my friends experienced, because it might be personal for them. But essentially, it feels like all of a sudden, if you look at the pixels in a picture, and they just go poof, and you can see each and every color, and you're not quite sure how to put them back together. That's what it feels like when you're sensitive to it. So for me, it's like poof, and I can go into all of these different pixels, and those pixels are attached to, non-attached really, but they're connected to, well, would be a better term, different colors and different frequencies. So it's like, where do I go? What do I do? Now I'm going to use that analogy and bring that into our patterns in our lives. So I had a dear friend say to me yesterday, I think her words were depressed, but I would perhaps say that it's anxiety. So what happens is this anxiousness comes up. All of these thoughts come up that we didn't realize were there. We might be sensing thoughts in the collective. So I also compare it to, let's say you have a picture. We'll stick with the pixels analogy because I really like it. Let's say you have a picture, and all of a sudden all of the pixels get separated, and you don't know where you fit into that picture. You're not even sure what the picture looks like anymore. Let's picture our collective as one giant picture, and all of a sudden the sun activity lights it up, and all of the pixels lift and separate just for a moment. So you have all those spaces in between, and that's where you feel like I'm thinking this, I'm thinking that, I'm thinking this. Where did this thought come from? And so it's really important for us to ask ourselves one of my favorite questions that my friend Kat had brought up years ago was, who does this belong to? And I use it all the time. Also, is this mine? I like to use that one. Is this my thought, or am I tapping into a collective energy that's being pixelated right now for us to essentially pick apart and dissolve or integrate. And where does this fit into my reality? And it might not be something that fits into our reality. It might just be something for us to acknowledge, right? I always say recognize it, acknowledge it, or vice versa. And then maybe you don't need to do anything with it at all. Just recognizing that it's not yours. You don't have to hang on to it. Or it could be attached to a particular emotion that is just being uplifted by this solar activity or charge that's still in our system, and it's essentially magnetizing those thoughts or patterns to us. We can recognize it as a pattern and just breathe through it. It's really about just breathing through it and figuring what we need to do. One of my dear friends says to replace it, and that can be a good tool. I prefer to integrate it, dissolve it, recognize it, right? And then sometimes it just needs to sit with us for a minute, and then it just goes into another energy, which could be whatever resonates for you. For me, it's integration and dissolving and resolving it. And sometimes it's just letting it go, not necessarily replacing it with something more positive, although that can be a good tool as well. So these are all just different tools. We sometimes just have to dig a little deeper in our toolbox, right, to see what fits for us in that moment. There's no right or wrong. I wanted to share that too, because some people get a little bit like lost in, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? What's going on? Okay. So this sense of anxiety is, can sometimes be misinterpreted as negativity. That anxiety, anxiousness can sometimes just be, we're ruffled up. Everything just opened for us to feel into and to explore in such a way that it gives us the opportunity to just, how much can we ground? How much can we clear? How much can we let go? How much can we breathe? You know, just to kind of be that center of the tornado. So in those moments, and this is during the solar activity, that's why it's good to sometimes pay attention to what is going on in our environment, so we don't think it's just us. We recognize that everything works together, right? We're getting help from these higher frequencies and higher energies to help us clear, resolve, dissolve, integrate, acknowledge, and just be present with all of that stuff. And that's sometimes the challenge, is not necessarily needing to do anything. So the second thing I wanted to share that I was seeing as a common theme and denominator in this whole situation was this desire to move and to shift. I had a session with a beautiful light worker who just, I think, needed some validation, right? That they were not needing to do anything. And that's exactly what I saw. I was like, you already kind of know and most people do, right? Not everybody. Some people are really confused, and that's a different video. But there are a lot of us that are like, I think this is what I need to do right now. And I think what I need to do is not do anything. And that can be really challenging, especially when we're being stirred up and all this stuff is coming up and we're like, should I go here? Should I go there? Should I talk to this person? Should I make this decision? And those are the best times not to do anything for some of us. Because there's so many choices, there's so many opportunities, and it's easy to get pulled into someone else's frequency, something that might be an older energy that's just showing up for us, tickling the back of our memory, and then we turn and look at that, it grabs our attention, and we think that's where we need to go, but in actuality, it's only showing up for us in a synchronistic way for us to do nothing with it, to let it go and not get pulled into the need to feed it. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm kind of all over the place still. That's kind of a theme for me lately. Okay, what else? I'm getting some information about the grids. So I'm going to tune into that in a little bit after I stay on track with this. So it's this feeling of busyness, which can be then misinterpreted as anxiety because we think we have to be doing something. And some of those emotions of us feeling like we need to be doing more are part of what happens when we have this heightened planetary, solar, planetary, not just our planet, but all of the alignments, portal activation, grid activation. We feel this sense of urgency. And sometimes the sense of urgency can, again, be misinterpreted like we have to do something. And that isn't always the case. Those are the best times for us to be still, to see what it is that we don't have to do. That's sometimes showing up for us. However, noticing that people are off their rockers. I'm seeing it all over. Driving is particularly juicy right now. People just aren't paying attention because they get spaced out. Again, think of that vision of pixelated. Like you knew what your picture was and now you're like, where am I going? Why did I walk into this room? Who am I? And so being more cautious and aware of our surroundings, because other people aren't. They're not aware that this is going on. They don't realize that they're walking around ungrounded. They're making decisions. They're allowing their surroundings to drive them rather than them being in the driver's seat, right? They're just being pulled in 10 different directions. And that's why it's really important to get centered. And if we don't feel centered, that's okay. That's not the time to make a decision. So patience, give ourselves that being patient with it. Then on the flip side, for some of us, it is a call to action. So if you feel like I have to do something, I have to take action, but you're so pixelated that you're not sure where to go. So what would that action look like? Well, that action would look like paint, dance, move the energy, draw a picture, record what you're feeling, do some intense reading on things that excite you and make you, I get downloads oftentimes during these times. I'm drawn to great teachers. I'm drawn to, let's say, Rudolf Steiner or Edgar Cayce or Helen Blavatsky. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but I'm drawn to Nostradamus. I'm drawn to some of these spiritual teachers where they may not be 100% right, or Nikola Tesla, any of that stuff, where it stimulates your brain activity, where you feel like you can connect with it on that deeper level. That might be where you're at. So that might be, you can't create because you're so scattered, but you can focus on something that is also electrifying for you. And sometimes that is taking action in that moment to guide us into a subject that maybe we're getting information on, but we're just not sure where to put it yet. And it can be very stimulating and activating. At the same time, it could take us even more into that bigger pixelation. Like it can blow our minds even more where we're like, whoa, now I'm really scattered. So again, rein it back in. Eating certain foods, potatoes. I mean, I could eat potatoes pretty much for any meal, but root vegetables. Sometimes it's just about having some dark chocolate and just depends on what makes us feel more grounded. I'm not suggesting go out and eat a whole bag of potato chips like I did. But it sometimes can help us. But if we're in the healing work, recognize that can kind of weigh us down too. So we want to find that happy medium. So if we're a healer or we're working on sessions and we feel like all of a sudden things aren't as clear as they were, we're not able to tune in as much. For me, self-doubt starts to creep back in. Am I helping this person? And I kind of recognized that so I'm being guided to talk about this. My ears are ringing. That's another thing that comes up with these solar activities. Ringing in the ears, heart palpitations, lack of sleep, feeling of anxiousness. So not judging all of this stuff, just being aware is really key, really important. Acknowledging our awareness. Oh, okay, this is happening. All right, I don't have to take it personally. I'm not doing anything wrong. It's just something I'm feeling and experiencing. All right. So one of the things is, in healing work, one of my challenges has always been self-doubt, doubting my abilities, right? I'm not able to see as clearly, therefore I must need to do some clearing. Maybe this is on me. And sometimes that might be the case. However, sometimes it's just a lot of crazy energy, right? So just being okay with that and recognizing that you might not see things the same way you do when there's not a lot of solar activity going on. So before, for example, when I work with someone, I can get very clear pictures, or in other words, clairvoyance. But other times I hear it and I don't get clear pictures. Other times I feel it. It's more kinesthetic and none of that other stuff comes through. Other times I'm just guided to ask certain questions so that's what that person needs at the time. That's taken a lot of practice for me not to have to rely on one of those things. So for example, I've been getting a lot of clear pictures the last few months. Well, that stopped. I was getting no clear pictures the last couple of days. Comparatively, right? And so, some of us might second guess ourselves. We might say, oh, well then I've lost it. And in some cases, we might just need to not do sessions just to help ground those energies. But on the flip side, I was, when I was done with the sessions, it turned out that everybody I worked with shared with me what they experienced, and it was still valuable for them. In that moment, it was maybe what they needed, and I didn't need to fully understand it. The cards that I pulled were, I still use my animal cards. I love them. The challenge was spider, creativity. My answer was lynx, which is great mystery. And the outcome was python, which is healing. And so I recognize that's something that's going on for the collective. This need to figure everything out. This need to understand what's happening. Why is this happening? Et cetera, et cetera. So that was kind of one of my challenges when this happens, because I'm just like, wow, you look at those pixels and you can look at each individual one, but until you make the connections, it can feel a little schismed. It's like you feel like split into all these different versions of you. So it's difficult to sometimes, we want just that one, but we're being offered all of these versions. And we just sometimes have to let that go and be like, all right, this is what it is. I know people don't like that sentence. I love it. Because in this moment, the isness of the moment is what it is. There's sometimes no words for it other than that. All right. What else? Guess I'm not going into flow until my next video, because I'll probably run out of room on this one. Yeah, so these are all just things that I wanted to share to recognize, right? And it's always a good reminder too, when we're experiencing that, remembering that we're not the ones doing the work. We're just conduits, right? I mean, granted, we're doing the work when it comes to practicing and being mindful and being a human, but ultimately we're a conduit that's connected through the spirit that moves through all things, as the indigenous people like to say. And that is what it's all about. And the more we can recognize that, the easier it becomes to just let go. And as some say, let go and let God, right? Whatever that looks like for you. And so I'm just going to pause. And so that is challenging sometimes for us, wanting to, I still have that ego, the human. We could call it ego, or I could just call it human nature, where I want to fix, I want to help, I want to solve, I want to cure. And I have to remind myself that's not necessarily what needs to happen in this session. It might just be about coming together and communicating and helping that other person find their own answers by me being the conduit and the guide to assist them in that journey, right? It's not always about fixing the problem or finding that problem. It's coming together to offer a solution in an energetic exchange. And that's difficult for a lot of people on both ends. Some people want straight answers. And it's funny because I'd say sometimes that comes through, straight answer. I don't see that as being important for you right now, but here's why. And that could change. Or this is what I see going on. You might want to drink more cranberry juice because I feel that something's going on with your kidneys. But then it's recognizing that could be a potential. So take care of yourself. Otherwise, something could happen with kidneys, but could happen to anybody. But some of us have certain generalized areas that are weaker, that we're not paying attention to. So sometimes I'll work with someone and bring that to the awareness of the individual. That doesn't mean that I am predicting what's going to happen, because that wouldn't be true from my perspective, how I work. There might be other, clairvoyance or psychics or whatever we want to label certain healers who are aware of those probabilities that might see something really specific. I don't tune in that way because it is, well, sometimes I will if it's immediate, but you get what I mean. I hope. So it's about that journey of helping empower the other person to come to their own conclusions sometimes. Okay, I went off on like 3 different tangents there. So I'm at 22. Okay, 2222. So I'm going to maybe just go into a little flow from there. So I hope that helped some people maybe watching this put some pieces together, put their pixelations back together, and go and recognize a little bit of what that solar activity means, what it feels like, how can I properly utilize that energy? Because if we're so scattered that we're just walking in circles, that isn't necessarily the best use of these energies coming in, because these energies are coming in to help us. And it doesn't necessarily feel like help in the moment. Sometimes it feels like, oh, I've got a lot to purge. I've got a lot of things that I need to just get rid of right now, and not letting that weigh heavy on us. It's just like, all right, here we go, right? Okay, let's go into a little flow. I'll just go until I run out of room or am guided to stop. Well, I only have 10 minutes, so that's about what I've got. So I just want to kind of, I had gotten away from the habit. In the beginning, when I started doing these videos 2 years ago now. No, 3 years ago. It was always about dropping into the heart, taking a breath, embodying, and my friend Kat kind of reminded me, Carrie, why don't you just get back to people dropping into their heart? And it's that simple. And I'm like, oh yeah, thanks, forgot about that. I mean, I'm always talking about it, get into the heart, but let's do that, before we do something, drop into that heart space. What am I feeling right now? Am I feeling anxiety? Or I'm going to give myself permission to feel that. And then I'm going to give myself permission to just breathe through it. And see, I like to just always visualize kind of this energy. Sometimes what I visualize is this emerald green light just pouring through my body. Sometimes it's a gold. Usually it's this kind of green and gold frequency that I love playing with, that I just spread throughout my entire body. Sometimes I play with like a white blue color that spreads throughout. Just play with it a little bit. what you're drawn to. There's no right or wrong. And I just expand it out like a bubble. And the funny thing is, sometimes I'll visualize that, like I'll go into my heart and I'll expand it out and it gets stuck. Sometimes it's like bubble. It doesn't want to go out any further. And I'm like, whoa, okay. All right, so let's see if we can soften that, right? Let's see if I can soften that bubble and make it more, is it permeable? More like like the spirit that moves in all things. I visualize that energy maybe having a little bit more of electric tendrils to kind of soften and move through whatever it is that I'm feeling stuck in right here. And then I can kind of feel a softening in the chest, in the back, and just through the whole body. So that's a kind of a tool that I use to get into the heart space. Sometimes it's just feeling gratitude for the fact that I am still breathing. Sometimes it's feeling appreciation for my husband, or feeling appreciation for a pet, my dog. Sometimes I feel appreciation for my family, not necessarily in any particular order, just in that moment, whatever brings me right into that space. It could be a tree that I'm sitting under. I'm just like, wow. And that sometimes can happen that quickly to shift us from anxiety into coherence. Or we may still feel anxiety, but it may be just that much less. And you guys, that's another thing that's coming through, is it's all about the baby steps. I had a beautiful session with a lovely light worker the other day, and she was like, I love it, because whenever we do work with one another, it's activating for both of us, right? So she had said, you know, what I'm discovering, whether it was from us talking about it or just, I think it's something that she was being reminded of by the questions I was asking in the conversation we were having, is sometimes it's not about these big changes and these big moves. Oh, I need to just move out of state. Sometimes it's the little changes. You know, maybe I need to change, get a roommate. Maybe I need to find a new roommate. Maybe I need to just live by myself for a while. Maybe I need to just change apartments and see kind of maybe being in a different environment, how that feels, before I decide to just jump ship and move to a completely different country. You know, these are the kinds of things. Where in our lives are we trying to make these huge changes when we might need to just hone in on the little steps first? And so back into that heart space, that's kind of what I was referring to, is the little things help chip away at the bigger things that maybe we are aware of, but we just can't quite get there. But sometimes we're not aware of them. And by doing these little, keep it simple, right? That's why I called this Keep It Simple Starseeds, because sometimes we overcomplicate things. These simplified little things of breathing in, breathing out. How do I feel? 5 breaths in, 5 breaths out. Oh, I feel a tiny bit better. Great. Hang on to that. Don't ignore it and be like, yeah, but I've got this big. No. What's the next step? Oh, I'm going to try that heart bubble. I'm going to go get grounded. Oh, maybe I feel that much better. At least that much, it adds up throughout the day. Before we know it, it's that much and it's that much. We sometimes get caught up in needing this huge change. And because of that, we're always projecting ourselves into the future or into the past about what we haven't been able to do. And we're missing all of the in-between pieces. It's like laying out this giant puzzle and we put together the border, right? But we don't know how to put the middle together or get to that other side because we're worried about, how am I going to fill this huge puzzle? Again, pixels. Okay. Now I'm really low on. So I'll just keep going. So that's something that's really a constant message that comes up over and over again. And I was asked if I do mentorship programs by a couple of people, and I will be doing that. Thank you so much for anybody interested. It just warms my heart that someone would be interested in doing that with me and working together on that. And I would love to do that. And I am putting together a program, by the way, down the road. But just so you know, what I just shared is part of what I would be sharing in a mentorship program. And what I share in all of these videos is essentially how I work with what I've got in order to create that expansion. So I'm being guided to share a little bit about that as well. I work with a lot of people, many beautiful people, who really just want to be psychic, right? They want to be able to tell the future. Hold on, I just clear for a moment. As I have so many practical solutions coming in, it's like boom, boom, boom. Head, crown, headaches, all of this stuff can be part of what's going on, by the way. I've been guided, just remind I have to drink more water. Drink more water, that'll help. Okay, electrolytes as well. Cell salts as well. Where was I? Oh, I lost it. It's not a good one too. The little things, I'm gonna pause for just a moment. Okay, you know, and I brought this up before, I wanna speak light language. Light language for me came in steps. It didn't just happen, but it felt like it just happened. Like it felt like all of a sudden one day I was speaking this language. But when I started to think about it and go back into my memory, I realized that I had been drawing squiggles thinking it was just doodles and it was light language. I realized I had been hearing it in the back of my mind like a whisper for a long time. I realized I was doing it with my hands, right? And did not know it came in little bits, and then all of a sudden, the clairvoyance, which isn't what people think it is, you guys. There are some clairvoyants out there that are like spot on. They are really, that's their gift. I jack into many different things, like a jack, like a conduit. So I get a little of this and a little bit of that, and I like it that way, right? I like to be able to utilize all of my senses. That's what I've asked for. But my point is, it takes practice sometimes, differentiating between what's relevant and what isn't. It's not always clear. So it does take work. And so what I'm being guided to just share is not to get frustrated. I mean, you might feel frustrated, we're human, but not to get frustrated with the process, because I've done that. I get frustrated still to this day. Yesterday, what's going on? Why am I not clear? Oh, yeah, reminder, solar activity. Maybe I should have rescheduled, but it turned out beautiful anyways, because that's how it was meant to be. Not getting caught up in perfection, right? Because sometimes all of the time, that's not what it's about. We have our own way of doing things. And my friend Candace brought up a really beautiful point yesterday. And she had said, oh, I lost it again. It's, you guys, really, squirrel. It's one of those pretty lights, distraction. It's recognizing, you guys, this is seriously, it's going to be another one of those days. Woo, I'm going to get grounded. I'm going to end on this note. I will just say that when we're in this space, it's sometimes we're being offered these ahas, and recognize, it was that we don't have to quote someone